Hey everybody, Jam City is one of the largest and most successful mobile free-to-play game publishers in the world with a lot of hit titles such as Cookie Jam, Panda Pop, the recently launched Harry Potter Hogwarts Mystery, and more recently they have made a couple of acquisitions such as Disney's Emoji Blitz from Disney and Bingo Pop from Yukon Games based in Canada. Now, how has the company been able to be so successful? Well, one of the key pillars of success in addition to the games themselves is the marketing side of the equation, which is more about user acquisition and how do you get players to come into your game and play your game. And so today we will be speaking to Brian Sapp, who heads user acquisition and performance marketing at Jam City. And we will be talking about a few key topics with respect to user acquisition. For example, from a marketing perspective, the difference between brand marketing and performance or user acquisition-based marketing. What does it take to be successful in the new world of user acquisition? The type of teams and how you would structure a team if you're building a user acquisition team for your mobile game. And a lot of other great topics that we're going to talk about in today's interview with, again, Brian Sapp, VP of User Acquisition at Jam City. Let's go. I wanted to start by just assuming a general audience. Could you talk to me about the role of of the user acquisition marketing department and your role specifically here at Jam City?
Sure. So my name is Brian Sapp. I oversee the UA marketing team. It's a team of about 24 people right now.
Yeah.
And UA marketing or performance marketing is really marketing that is tied very much to measurement.
Okay.
And really at the core of it is data.
Right.
And so, for most mobile gaming companies that are free to play, performance marketing is a big driver of both the growth and the revenue for those companies. And so for us, especially, everything we do around what channels we spend with, what we're focused on is really costs per user and then the revenue coming in from those users afterward, or the quality of those users.
Right.
And so when we say performance marketing, it's really around these KPIs, these data measurement that we really care about, which is slightly different than brand marketing,
Right.
where that's more encompassing around awareness, different channels that you can't necessarily measure how effective it is. But performance marketing, it's all about measurement, all about data.
And at a free-to-play game studio like Jam City, so you mentioned both the performance marketing and the brand marketing. So how much brand marketing exists within Jam City relative to your side, the performance or user acquisition side?
Yeah, so Jam City was a mobile-first company and was built on the back of performance marketing.
Okay.
Performance marketing has been one of the biggest reasons Jam City has grown the size it has.
Right.
This year alone, we released Harry Potter. The game has done over 40 million installs.
Wow.
And a lot of that was driven by one, it being a very successful IP.
Right.
The other part is scaling UA, scaling user acquisition. And so we are definitely a performance marketing heavy company.
Yeah.
We do brand marketing. It's just not at the core of what drives our growth.
Okay.
And that's slightly different than some other gaming companies, especially ones that are more entertainment focused, such as Warner Brothers, I'm sure like NBC Universal.
Right. Yeah, we actually have a big brand marketing piece.
Totally.
But on the brand marketing side, are there some examples of what you guys do on that side?
Yeah. So just to give you an example, we have an integrated marketing team, and they're working on activations that might be things like working with influencers around certain game events. It could be working with celebrities and having them come in both into the game and then into some of our marketing collateral.
Yeah.
And so they're always working on ideas that kind of fall outside of traditional performance marketing, but that can actually help enable performance marketing to perform better.
Right. Could you talk to me about what does your day-to-day look like? What are you kind of doing on a general basis?
Yeah. A lot. So we have 8 titles that we're running UA on scale at. We also have 3 titles in soft launch. And so for me, at the highest level, it's setting the budgets for the games based on our goals and objectives, which is usually around payback and how we want that money to come back to us.
Yeah.
The other thing is kind of setting strategy and helping the UA team set strategy for each of the games and different types of tests that we want to run.
Right.
And then working on creative analysis and kind of driving the creative team to really push ourselves around performance of UA creatives. And then planning for the soft launch titles, helping set kind of checkpoints into when we think these games are ready for us to kind of give the green light to.
Right.
And so between all of that, all these games are in different life cycle phases.
Yeah.
It's kind of different strategies for all of them, but really helping the team kind of hone in on the right strategy.
Can we dig into that a little deeper? So just like assuming a typical game launch from sort of conception to pre-production to production to soft launch then hard launch. Can you talk about how user acquisition, where do you guys get involved and how do you work with whether it's the production team or other teams during each phase of that sort of game development process?
Sure. So soft launch, or I kind of called it the R&D phase,
Sure.
really has kind of generally 3 phases. The first phase is the tech phase where we kind of get the game out in the wild, see if there's any bugs.
Right.
And in this case, UA is basically trying to get enough users to make sure we can get a good read on that.
Right.
The second phase is generally early retention. And so from a UA standpoint, we are trying to drive cheaper installs, usually in tier 2, tier 3 countries.
Right.
With a focus on getting statistical significance on retention, right?
Okay.
And so we're not necessarily focused on what's happening later in the funnel. We're not focused on getting our best performing creatives in just yet, nor are we really ready. It's really just about stat sig on what's happening in the game, so the game team can understand the metrics they're seeing and where they need to improve. And then phase 3 is really we call it getting ready for the big leagues when we start going into tier 1 territories. Really start honing in on our creative and seeing what works, trying to understand what our predictive LTVs are and what our cost per user is, and then building out the business plan for the game. Is this game viable or is it not viable?
Right.
And then we go into a worldwide launch if it is viable, and from there it's coming up with a worldwide launch plan, which is going to be different for every game. For Harry Potter, we were very aggressive because we knew that the IP was so strong. There hadn't been a free-to-play game for Potter in the market.
Right.
And so it was a pretty large worldwide launch plan. For a non-IP title, it might be a different strategy. It might be slow growth. It also depends on the genre. For some of our match 3 puzzle games, we're looking at multi-year paybacks.
Yeah.
Therefore, the risk is higher in the beginning of spending too much against it, right?
Yeah.
And then once we're through the worldwide launch period, it's really a question of what's the strategy to grow the game, right? And should we be aggressive now versus taking our time?
Right.
And then kind of later stage, we start moving into retargeting. How effective is it? Should we have it always on? Is it and so depending on the game's life cycle, there's definitely always different strategies.
Got it. And just going back and digging a little bit deeper, so let's say, you talked about soft launch, and you kind of test a lot of sort of technical stuff at that point, and then you focus on, let's say, D1 retention or some early retention metric, and let's say the metric doesn't quite hit what you guys are looking for. What happens then? Do you just go back to the product group, and then when they say they're ready, you test again, or how does that work?
Yeah, generally we're spending very low amounts during this time. So there's not a lot of risk for us to just keep spending on the UA side.
Right.
And the product team will basically have these benchmarks that they want to hit, and if they're coming below them, they will, every update they're putting in features to kind of address that, right? And so do we see it improving or do we see it decreasing?
Right.
And of course you never, you don't have to exactly hit your benchmarks to go worldwide. But I think the more important thing before going worldwide is that the overall business plan makes sense.
Right.
In other words, your cost per user is less than or equal to your LTV, right? And that's what's most important. And however you get there, obviously,
Right.
by, however you get there.
Can you talk a little bit more now about your team structure? So, the user acquisition landscape is kind of complicated. I think there are various ways you could structure your team, whether it's based on sort of, channels or based on games or from a structural perspective. How have you thought about this is how I'm going to set up my team to be the most effective for UA.
Certainly a challenge, and I think there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Okay.
What I've done here at Jam City is basically the UA team is made up of 4 teams. There's the media buyers, analysts that help us build the dashboards and analyze all the data.
Okay.
There's the creative team,
Yep.
And that's basically all the ones making the creative, plus we outsource some creative.
Okay.
And then there's creative strategy team, which is a small team, but they're hyper focused on what competitors are doing, what's working best for us, overall kind of best practices in creative and applying it across all games.
Okay.
And so those are the 4 teams that make up the UA marketing team. And then within the media buying team, this is where it can get extremely challenging. Just to give you an example, like of course you can basically allocate a team around channels,
right.
And you tend to see that more often when you have 1 or 2 games at scale, or you see it with non-gaming, such as like Netflix or Hotels Tonight, right, where it's really just one product. And those teams are pretty large, and they're focused around channels or geos or sometimes both.
Right.
We were set up that way, and Jam City launched and went to scale with really only 2 games, Cookie Jam and Panda Pop.
Right.
And at that time, I think that made sense.
Okay.
But as we released more games, communication and strategy across the team became very challenging. When a buyer was only focused on their channel, right? And what was being missed was kind of the holistic view and health of the game.
Okay.
So we actually ended up reorging the team around supercells is what we call them.
Okay.
But they're basically small teams of 4 to 5 that are focused on a group of games.
Okay.
And they split up the channels amongst themselves, but more importantly, they're thinking holistically about the strategy of each of those games.
Why do you think that strategy worked? Do you think it's because that sort of supercell felt more ownership against those games, or like what do you think is led to the increased performance?
I think with the smaller team, you actually had improved communication.
Okay.
Right? So you have 3 to 4 people working very closely together, as opposed to 12 people working across everything together.
Right.
That's one. It was improved ownership. Like, hey, we're responsible for these games no matter what. And then it was putting the right personnel in those teams. Right? The right experience of Facebook buyer, network buyer, and then strategist or someone who's a little bit more senior who understands like the overall game. Like, how are paid installs doing? How are organics doing? Where are we seeing opportunity? And kind of going out and like coordinating amongst the team. So it's a combination of more ownership, better communication, a smaller team, and the right personnel. It's almost like a special forces team, right? Like they're way more effective when each person has their role and they work well together as a group.
How does your user acquisition teams work with other departments within Jam City, whether it's with the product management team or other teams? Like what kinds of communication happens, and who do they have to work with so that user acquisition can be more effective?
So probably the closest working relationship is the PM team, and the PM teams are responsible for the business of the game. Every game is a living, breathing entity, and has live events, has certain updates, and the PMs are also responsible for the P&L. So the UA team is constantly communicating around ramping up or slowing down spend around events when it makes sense, around tentpole events, as well as like what the budget is, how we're pacing, and how performance is doing. And then beyond that, we interact with integrated marketing, who is doing some of the brand marketing activations, publishing, which for us is kind of the App Store optimization team, and UA actually handles a lot of that as well. And then to a lesser extent, PR and some other entities, but PM and integrated marketing, and then publishing are probably the 3 biggest.
I think there's an increasing view that user acquisition plays a very strong component in the success of mobile games today. Like increasingly more important for the user acquisition team to be doing a really great job. And so, from your perspective, in today's market, what does it take to be as effective as possible as a performance marketer in UA?
So clearly, like I think what's become very important over the last couple of years is understanding how to buy on social platforms. So when we say social, we really mean the self-attributing networks such as Google and Facebook. Those 2 kind of control the market at this point, it's absolute necessity to have UA buyers understand how to buy on those platforms. Outside of that, the networks are important for scaling, but the social is most important. And then I would say creative. Like creatives become very important as the market's gotten more competitive.
Right.
And so really trying to understand the psychology of what drives players into the game, how to differentiate amongst the competitors, but also what drives payers into the game, and what that motivation is. For example, when I was at WB, I worked on RPGs, and we found that showing character progression, rank up, really brought in payers. Like for whatever reason, that's what motivated them. And so for a puzzle category, it's something else. And so for each genre and then for each game, you're going to find creatives that really resonate with the users you care about, and then just getting smarter and smarter on that.
How do you get good at that side, on the creative side? So let's say someone's part of one of your 4 teams, a creative strategy team. What does it take for someone to be really, really good at coming up with these ideas for creative ideas, so that you have high-performing creatives?
It's an interesting question. The reason I say that is that I've found that there's no faster way to get your ego beaten down than to come up with creative ideas that you are just absolutely positive are going to work, and they don't. And every UA team has had that experience. And I think people who haven't done UA or come from brand marketing, where it's less measured, tend to come in with like a lot of determination that they're right. And they haven't been beaten down yet.
So you think it's important to have like an experimental framework?
Yes, and it's important to try a lot of different things and to throw your preconceived notions out the window. To give you an example, like I've run very expensive CG trailers, and then run, I would say, lower quality 5-second ads, and the 5-second ads that were lower quality outperform the CG trailers. And so that's not uncommon. And so what it takes is just, our creative strategy team is focused on IPM, which is basically impression to install, and then other later funnel metrics. And we're hyper focused on improving it. So we'll look at like what's working, what's not working, and we try to like basically use the learning across all of our games, right? If it applies to one match 3, let's apply to all match 3. So that helps accelerate learnings. And then looking at the competitors and trying to understand what they're doing. We take feedback from the studios as well, but sometimes the studios don't, they're not performance marketers, and they think high quality art always wins, and it doesn't. And that's when I kind of go back to the fact that like you need to be looking at the data to understand that. The best looking creative doesn't always win. It's just the fact.
And then going back to your team, and let's say there's somebody out there who's interested in getting into performance marketing, to user acquisition. What qualities do you look for when you're hiring people onto your team?
Excel skills are a must. We generally will send out Excel tests. I also will put together, often, it depends on the seniority of the role, but just put together an example question around, if you had $1 million, how would you launch this game? And it's less like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's more that I like to see 3 or 4 slides on how a person thinks. And so that kind of comes down to how they communicate their ideas, and what thought process goes into it. Because it's important that when you do UA, you can communicate like your strategy to the game teams, to other teams. So basically it's data chops, which kind of Excel, understanding numbers, and then it's communication and kind of strategy, and being able to communicate it well through slides, presentation. And then I think lastly is like, a creative thinker to think outside the box for tests. What kind of tests we want to run, things that we try to kind of map together.
So when I look at Jam City, in terms of the product portfolio and the product mix, I'm noticing more, it seems like there's a shift towards branded IP-based games. You mentioned Harry Potter, but certainly there was the acquisition of the Disney Emoji Blitz team. And as you think about doing user acquisition for kind of branded IP versus original IP, what are some of the considerations, or like what's the thought process behind when you think about doing marketing for a branded game versus like an original IP game?
I think Jam City has always kind of been in both worlds. Some of our older titles like Book of Life, our IP titles, and Snoopy Pop, for example, And they both come with advantages and disadvantages. Some of the disadvantages of working with IP is obviously you have to, get approvals from the IP holders,
Right.
which can be restrictive
Right.
and sometimes slow down the UA creative process.
Right.
But the disadvantages of working with non-IP is it's not well known,
Right.
and your CPIs could be higher theoretically. Generally speaking, IP titles have a much different launch than non-IP titles.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, since IP titles, generally speaking, depending on the IP, are well known,
Yeah.
you're usually going to see a very low CPI at worldwide launch.
Yeah.
That is an opportunity cost that I for one, don't think you should pass up on. And I was
So you want to be more aggressive than
yeah,
launch. Okay.
yeah. And I think I look at the launches almost like supernovas.
Yeah.
And every IP is different, and I've definitely seen IPs where there is no CPI reduction, and you throw that out the window. But
Yeah.
for Harry Potter, we saw amazing results. So we did push harder. Versus non-IP, you're not going to see that same kind of momentum at launch.
Right.
So you're just taking a more calculated growth perspective on non-IP, and those are the biggest differences.
You mentioned like two of the most important channels from a user acquisition perspective are Facebook and Google, and certainly there's been in the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of innovation with respect to like machine learning based bidding. Can you talk about like some of the recent changes or some of the new things happening from, because it seems like there's a lot of application of machine learning, whether it's to bidding or whether like some of the stuff we're hearing about like Bidalgo applying machine learning to creatives optimization. Can you talk about some like the new things coming up?
Yeah, so I think like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
Google rolled out UAC, which basically, I think at the time there was a lot of backlash because you could target YouTube, AdWords, search independently, and then when UAC rolled out, they're like, nope, you can't do that anymore. The machines are smarter, let them do it. And I think it was a little bumpy for a while, but now we're seeing great results. And clearly it makes sense, right? Like on a long enough timeline, with enough data and the right algorithm, all these big platforms are going to be able to basically optimize better than you can,
Right.
and save you a ton of time. And now Facebook's kind of going in that direction. Some of our best performing ad sets for Facebook are just broad targeting male
Right.
18 to 55, and then you give Facebook your goal, on AEO, app event optimization, and it just does its thing.
Right.
So I think everything is going in that direction. It's just a question of when it gets there.
Right. So
Facebook
what
and
happens
Google-
in that environment? So does creatives optimization become the most important thing, or like
Creative optimization, and I will say the targeting is still important.
Okay.
In that using your own data to enhance your targeting.
Oh, got it.
So, for example, creating lookalike audiences off of an in-game event and testing a bunch of different in-game events for lookalike audiences.
Right.
And 1 out of 5 might be great.
Okay.
Separate from purchase event optimization, which is always the holy grail.
Right.
But it's really getting smarter about your own data and how
Right.
you can use that to your advantage.
Okay. And then can we shift focus and maybe talk a little bit more about you? So like, how did you get into the industry? What was sort of your career trajectory leading up to, kind of coming here to Jam City?
So we're in LA now.
Yeah.
I went to college here and played in bands actually, and was in the music industry. I was basically negotiating the rights for music to be in movies, TV, and film for years, and didn't love it, but I was doing it because I played in bands, and it was kind of like I could be close to it.
Right.
However, this was like 2010, 2009. Both those industries were dying, and mobile gaming started right around that time, and especially free to play, and it just excited me.
Yeah.
So I actually quit my job and moved up to the Bay Area with 6 months savings.
Wow.
And was running out of money, crashing on a friend's couch. And I interviewed at Tapjoy when there was only 30 people, and ended up getting it. I had gone on like 24 job interviews and no one hired me except for Tapjoy.
Oh, wow.
And so I got into Tapjoy when I was 30 as like one of their first direct developer partnerships people, and my job was to bring on game developers as advertisers and publishers.
Okay.
And it the rest is kind of history. Like
Okay.
Tapjoy just blew up. We were one of the biggest platforms at the time. Got to work with like Kabam, Supercell, Zynga, all the early guys.
Right.
And it was a great crash course in all things, both UA data, monetization, game mechanics.
Yeah.
We had our own publishing fund, and we were like funding games.
I remember that period.
Yeah, and so it was just awesome
Yeah.
for me personally
Right.
in my career. And then I decided I wanted to go compete because I was it was very consultative.
Yeah.
I couldn't actually make decisions.
Right.
And so we had a great opportunity at WB Games to oversee UA analytics and monetization.
Right.
And that was awesome. And had a lot of responsibility and got to learn a lot. And was a part of a lot of big launches, including Game of Thrones, Conquest, Mortal Kombat, and Justice 2. And so that really kind of honed me on how to work with IP holders, especially.
Right.
And it was small. For Warner Bros. Being a big company, we were a small, scrappy team, didn't have a lot of resources. And so was there for 3.5 years, and then I had known the people at Jam City for a long time, knew about the great culture,
Right.
And really wanted to join a mobile-first company
Right.
that had like data at its heart
Yeah.
and had resources. And so decided to join Jam City about a year ago,
Okay.
overseeing the UA marketing team, and it's just been awesome. It's
What's-
a different mindset.
Yeah. What's a high level thoughts in terms of transition from San Francisco Bay Area to Los Angeles?
Well, LA is becoming more San Francisco-like by the day.
Okay.
When I moved here, I thought it would be difficult to recruit people from San Francisco, and it's
Yeah.
been actually the opposite.
Uh,
It's been really much easier than I thought to get people to move down because the cost of living is a little bit lower. It's not like insanely cheaper, but
Right.
a little bit. The weather's a hell of a lot better. And then it seems like LA is just exciting. Like,
Okay.
we have 2 football teams coming like here now. They're building like a train line. I take the train to work. I couldn't do
nice.
that before.
Right.
And the city's changing, and they're putting a lot of money in ahead of the 2028 Olympics.
Right.
And then a lot of tech is moving down here. So it seems to be on the up,
Right.
so yeah, it's great.
So last question, what do you like about working in user acquisition the most? And then what do you like about working here at Jam City?
Working in UA the most is just the live operations of it. Like,
Right.
I love that every day it's dynamic, the data changes. It's living, breathing all the time, and I like that.
Right.
I like being always on call, if you will. I mean, that sounds like most people wouldn't like that, but I just like that it's always going,
Right.
and that we're always having to make optimizations, and that things always change. And all of our games are living, breathing entities. And then I love launching games.
Right.
There's nothing more fun than worldwide launches. It's just, what other products can you get millions of people within like 3 years?
Right.
I can't think of one. So that's super exciting to me. And then Jam City, it's just the culture, the willingness to take risks, the willingness to be aggressive.
Right.
And it comes from Chris and Josh and Aber, the founders, down to the entire studios and teams. And then the autonomy that comes with it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, everybody. I'm here with Brian Sapp here at Jam City, and that's a wrap.
Cool.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.